And now what's happening is with the Z8, you're getting all of that for $1,500 less, bro. Man. The Nikon Z9 is, in my opinion, arguably the king of flagship cameras, especially at $5,500. The Nikon Z8 is pretty much a carbon copy of the Nikon Z9. Yeah, it's about 99% of the same camera for the price of a prosumer camera at $4,000. The Nikon Z8 is competing with the Sony a7R5, which launched maybe 6 months ago. That is currently my main shooter. I just made a video and I just explained in a recent video why the a7R5 is my main camera. And then there's also the Canon R5, which I have used so many times throughout the years, right? This camera was launched a couple years ago. And the funny part about it is that it can still compete with almost anything out there. The R5 was definitely a camera that was ahead of its time. All right, so do you guys remember the legendary Nikon D850? It was first introduced to the world in July of 2017, and it quickly became regarded as the best DSLR camera ever made, right? So with the D850, Nikon decided to combine the two flagship camera lines, the D800, which is the high resolution, and then the fast action D5 series, into one single camera that can do it all. And it was a class-leading camera in 2017. And till this day, it still holds a legendary status among the photography community. And I'm only saying this because now in 2023, the Nikon Z8 is a modern day D850 because it's kicking ass and taking names when compared to its direct competition. Okay, so you're getting the same stacked 45 megapixel sensor. Stacked sensor, right? So this is a fully electronic camera. There is no mechanical shutter. You're getting 20 frames electronic. And I've shot in pro baseball with the Nikon Z9, and there is no rolling shutter. Incredible speed for a camera that's at $4,000. The a7R5, more megapixels, does not a stacked sensor. I get what, like 5 to 7 frames per second. And you know, this is not a sports camera. So me taking this out to the field, it would struggle in that kind of environment. It crushes the a7R5 in speed. The Canon R5, again, does not have a stacked sensor. Can shoot 20 frames per second electronic, but we all know that this camera does suffer from rolling shutter. So chances are, if I were to go to a pro baseball game with the R5, I'm gonna be shooting in mechanical, which is 12 frames per second. So the Z8, right off the bat, in the price point, it's kicking butt with its 45 megapixel stacked sensor and what that offers. You get the same processor that's in the Z9. You get the same autofocus system, except for now you have an airplane autofocusing mode, which I'm not gonna lie, when I shot the Air and Water Show here in Chicago, I was missing a lot. I don't know if there wasn't enough contrast in the sky with the planes, but the camera was hunting a lot with the 100 to 400 lens. So I'm curious to see if this airplane mode, dedicated airplane mode, will help this camera perform when shooting airplanes. The Nikon Z9 is the weakest one out of the three, but not that far behind, I would say. I think out of this segment, out of the $4,000 segment, if the Z8 is exactly how the Z9 is, the a7R5 is still the best autofocusing camera in the prosumer, right? The $4,000 range. You can also shoot, 30 frames per second in JPEG, or that 120 frames per second mode in JPEG as well. You get access to pre-release capture. No mechanical shutter, so it's a fully electronic camera like the Z9. Shutter speeds up to 1/32,000 of a second. And in the segment, in the $4,000 range, again, the a7R5 only has a 1/8,000 of a second shutter speed. It's capped out at. And I don't like that because with these f1.2 lenses shooting in bright sun, there are times where the exposure, you still need a little bit more, you might have to stop down the lens. Same goes with the Canon R5, 1/8,000 of a second. So that's more flexibility, more capability that you have with the Z8. With the Z8, you get the same 4-way tilting screen that you have on the Z9. You know, I like this screen. If you're behind the camera and you're not worried about filming yourself or taking pictures or doing anything, this screen is it's a really nice screen. I really enjoyed using this screen. The problem is, I think Nikon did miss an opportunity with that hinge somehow making it flip the other way. So like the Sony a7R5's 4-way tilt screen means that I can go vertical, right, and get my line straight, hold the camera right here, center position. I can do this if I want, or I can do this if I want. I can move this screen any way that I want. And that adds so much value to the a7R5 from a photo and video perspective that again, you have to watch my switch video to the a7R5. It adds that much value to someone like me. I think they missed an opportunity to make the Z8 and modifying the screen where it would somehow flip, add another hinge, and it would flip forward. I think that just adds another layer of versatility, and really, I think would push it more to the video market. But that's just my opinion. You get the same EVF, which it's nice and sharp. You get the same IBIS, same ISO range. And this one's crazy. You get the exact same video specs. There's no crippling here. So you get up to 8K 60 RAW. You can shoot up to 4K 120. On top of that, you know, you get all those ProRes options and those incredible codecs that the Z9 had. This camera is absolutely stacked for $4,000. It just doesn't make any sense to me. The Sony a7R5, I understand you don't want to step on the toes of the A1, for example, but this is where Nikon has an advantage, right? Because they don't have, or any other cinema cameras. This is where Nikon has an advantage because they don't have a cinema line to compete with. They just put everything in a $4,000 camera. The camera, my a7R5 caps out at 4K 60, but you get that crop. Okay, fine. Doesn't perform really well when it comes to rolling shutter. I do get 8K 24 frames per second, but I don't really use the 8K that much. The 4K 60 kind of kills me. I wish it did have a 4K 120 option, even if it was cropped. I mean, when you think about it, the Canon R5, which is the same price, pretty much the same price, this camera can not only shoot 8K, but I don't use 8K, but the fact that it can do 4K 120 and 4K 60 as well, that to me, okay, why doesn't a a7R5 have 4K 120 like the Canon R5 does when it was released a couple of years ago? The Z8, again, it's not competing with anything, so you're getting everything. You're getting all the goodies for $4,000. This makes it the most capable hybrid camera. The Z9 was already the most capable hybrid camera for the price in the entire market. And now what's happening is with the Z8, you're getting all of that for $1,500 less, bro. Man, that's absolutely killer for the price. So now let's go over some of the few differences between the Z8 and the Z9. So again, the Z8 has the airplane detection mode, which I'm pretty sure is going to go into the Z9 in a firmware update in the future. You have the ability to shoot HEIF 10-bit photos. So what that is, it's pretty much a JPEG sized file that you're able to retain more of that. It's what Apple uses for their compression for the photos, right? So they don't use JPEG. I believe they use HEIF, and HEIF just maintains more of the quality of the image than JPEG. That's my understanding of that. The Nikon Z8 has one CF Express Type B and one UHS to SD card slot, which I think is great because I have a ton of SD cards. CF Express Type B cards are very expensive. And because I think that this camera is going to cater to those people that have been using and holding on to their D850s, I think that having that one SD card is going to be beneficial because not everyone always needs, you know, top tier performance out of their camera. And SD cards are just much more cheaper than those Type B cards. So I actually think that's a good thing, in my opinion. The build quality is also going to be different. The Z9 has a D6 level weather resistance, right? It's made for being in, shooting sports, being in the rain. The Z8 has a D850 weather resistance. I'm not familiar with what that is, but I'm sure it's gonna be plenty good for almost anyone. Now, there's some other little things like in-camera skin smoothing, and portrait impression balance, which the Z7 II has something in regards to like fine-tuning your skin tones, which I've never used. I'm curious to see how that's gonna work out. But I'll tell you one thing, a couple of things that really caught my eye with the Z8. It still looks like it's a pretty chunky camera body. It weighs officially 910 grams with the battery inside. 910 grams is really close to 1,000 grams, all right? Now, looking at the competition, for example, the Z7 II weighs 694 grams. The Canon R5 weighs 738 grams with battery. The Sony a7R5 weighs 723 grams with a battery. The Canon R3, for example, which is a bigger camera, take the battery out of the Canon R3, it weighs 780 grams. Just think about that. The Z8 is gonna weigh 200 more grams than the R3 without a battery, which is a much bigger body, So this camera is not gonna be a lightweight mirrorless camera. It's really good. It's gonna feel like it's gonna be substantial in the hand. That's what I'm assuming. And that could either be a good or a bad thing. I think it's mostly gonna be a good thing. If you're gonna put bigger lenses on it, it's gonna balance out really well. I don't mind having a camera that weighs a good amount. I think, this might be a little bit too much to justify for shooting portraits. It is gonna be about 1/3 lighter than the Z9. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I just think that the expectation of a smaller mirrorless camera, I think people probably thought it was gonna be smaller, but it's still gonna be pretty big. And in terms of the battery, you get the same battery that's in the Z7, and it has a CIPA rating of 330. I don't really go by CIPA ratings, right? But the Z8 is a fully electronic camera, right? So you do have an option for a battery grip, and you have USB-C charging with continuous use, so you can charge it while you use it, right? But my concern is the Z8 having that sheer amount of horsepower that camera has, the same that's in here. How is it gonna hold up when shooting video, when shooting these high bitrate videos? How is it gonna hold up with that battery? The R5, I don't know what the CIPA rating is on the R5, but the R5 doesn't have great battery life. Curious to see what it's gonna look like on the Z8. I'm hoping to get that camera in soon so I could check it out for myself. But, for me, those are the two things that really caught my eye about this camera. Okay, so taking all of this information in, looking at the cameras that it is competing with, this is definitely a Sony a7 III moment. A camera that sets the bar. It's like a new bar. It's a new standard for that price range. The a7 III set the standard for a $2,000 hybrid camera. Now everyone had to try to beat it or compete with that. Nikon with the Z8 is now creating a new standard for that prosumer $4,000 price range, where Sony still felt like they had to cripple some of the video specs on the a7R5, given all the other cameras that it's competing with. That's just my opinion. That's my thoughts on that. And the Canon R5, which 2 years ago, again, it set that bar at 4,000, like really, really high. Camera's still ahead of its time, but the Z8 does give you more capability than the R5, and probably it's gonna be more reliable for longer periods of use. In the Nikon community, I felt like people felt kind of forgotten a little, which is understandable. Lenses were trickling out really slowly. Meanwhile, Sony and Canon are just dropping cameras here and there, all the time actually. At least Nikon provides firmware updates, right? But this is my ADHD just going crazy. I start getting into different things. But looking at the $4,000 range, man, you're getting almost everything that's in the flagship Z9. you're getting, I mean, videographers really haven't gone to Nikon for these insane video features because I feel like everyone's already invested in Sony and Canon. Sony and Canon have, well, Sony has way more lenses, you know, and Nikon still needs to make an impression with videographers, I think, and create more of an ecosystem of cameras. So this is a great start to that, but we need some more like Z6 II with a flip screen, creating a nice little ecosystem. And I think that they could be some of the top, they could be the top company in video if they were to, you know, play their cards right moving forward. If I were a Nikon shooter, I'd be ecstatic with this launch. For the price, for what you get, very impressive, very impressive. How many minutes am I in this video? Okay, yeah, see, this is a lot longer than I thought. See, this is my ADHD kicking in. See, if I don't have like notes or a script, I just start blabbing and just talking about all the things that are just floating around in my head. But, you know, someone that uses and is using a Sony A7R5 as my main camera, I can sit here and tell you that the Z8 on paper, it crushes my A7R5 in terms of overall hybrid use. But again, for someone like me, having this is that important. It may not be important to you. And if this was not important to me, I'll take the hit on the autofocus. I would go with the Z8 as just, you know, just for the camera body. But of course, there are other factors too, you know, as to why I shoot Sony. It's all the lenses, all the options, all the other cameras that I can combine, you know, my ecosystem with, like the FX3, A7S III, all the cameras. Hopefully Nikon sends me the Z8 soon so I can test it out. I have an MLB pass, so I'm gonna be at Wrigley Field shooting the Cubs. That's the first place I'm stopping with the Nikon Z8. I'm gonna do some portraiture, all the things. Air and Water Show this year. I'm gonna be out there. If you made it up to this point, I'm gonna just assume that you're just listening to me on AirPods. You're not actually watching me because, you know, it takes a lot of attention span nowadays to make it to the end of videos. So, and maybe you care about what I have to say. I appreciate that. I think that I try to be an unbiased voice in this photography camera community. I have access to all the cameras. I'm very fortunate. I get to play with all the different cameras. So if you want to see more content, if it's first time watching me, if you want to see more unbiased content with someone that actually has experience in the field with all these cameras, please, you know, hit that little button down there. It starts with an S. I would appreciate that. And I'm going to check you out on the next one. All right. That's not how I wanted to end the video. That is all I have for now. On to the next one. Okay. All right, that is all I have for now, and I will see you. Okay, so that is all I have for now. Okay, so that is all I have for now. Okay, all right, so that is all I have for now, and I am on to the next one. You know what? I didn't realize that people are probably going to be wondering, why do you still have a Nikon Z9? Manny, you were supposed to sell it. You said you were going to sell it. You know, the truth is I was going to sell the Z9. And then when Nikon hit me up and said, hey, you want to test out the 85 1.2, right after I made that video, I ended up keeping the Z9 just so I can test the 85. And then I got too lazy to sell the Z9. So I still have it here. I haven't used it, but it's still here, and I still haven't sold it because of that. So is it still for sale? Not saying that I'm going to buy the Z8 now, but it's still for sale. So if you're interested, let me know. Send me an email, mannyortizphoto@gmail.com. I got to stop being lazy. Stop being lazy.